Hi, I'm Scott Hall. I'm the editor and publisher of Part-Time Audiophile. Another question I get asked a lot is, what is the absolute sound? Other than the fact that it's a magazine, right? They are pretty well known for the founder's vision, Harry Pearson's vision about what the job of a hi-fi system is. It's to recreate to the best of its ability the live event, the absolute best reproduction of that live event. But the target is that live event. It's this thing that happened at some point in time. Yeah. Now, that seems very reasonable. The problem I have with it is, well, there's many parts to that, but the first is, what do you mean by the live event? And I don't mean that in a like particularly annoying philosophical sort of way, but more like, what do you think of as the relevant aspects that must be present for that live event experience to be complete, to be full, to be a good rendition, a good replica of the original, for the illusion to be real, right? Is it size? Is it timbre? Is it timing errors? I mean, what are we talking about? Because when you get under the cover, you very quickly get to a point where you can't get it all, right? There is this oddness that happens. We have to make choices, especially when we're talking about and to a designer. I think it was the 2012 New York audio show. Stereophile editor John Atkinson asked a panel of writers, which was a little odd, but a panel of writers, why is it the case that with cost no object loudspeakers, that is, speakers that are designed without limit on affordability, on design, right? The best possible transducers imaginable. Why do they sound different? If they're supposed to be pointing at the absolute sound, if there is this kind of platonic ideal, if you will, of the way something ought to sound, then at some point, speaker designs ought to converge, right? Everything should be the same. It should be one thing that we all agree is the live performance. The fact that that doesn't happen, in fact, it doesn't happen by a large margin, is really interesting, right? It should tell us something kind of revealing. And that's, we are different. That should be obvious, but we as human beings are maybe, we were saying that we're lousy reporters. We're literally terrible at interpreting or separating our interpretation from the object that we're interpreting, right? And there's a philosophical problem here, this idea of where the world begins and where I end. Does the world even exist apart from the way I am interpreting it? I'm going to push all that to the side. But to note that over 2,700 years or so of philosophy, that is still a debate. It's not a matter of us being I don't know, blithe about it, right? And we can certainly ignore it, but it's there's a lot to ignore. And when you do that, you run the risk of either repeating arguments, good arguments, you repeat them poorly, or you just, I don't know, walk into a hole that's got very well-known paths leading towards it. So I want to be careful, but the point I'm going to go with is a slightly different one. It's not necessarily philosophy, this solipsism kind of idea. It's more technical, right? In the sense that what I like in a live performance or in a quote unquote real performance may not be what you do, right? It may be something completely different. You may be really interested in the breathy vocals and the rasp in somebody's voice. Maybe I'm interested in dynamics, right? This really kind of big swings from super quiet to super loud. It gets me all excited, right? Maybe I'm interested in, oh hell, I don't even know, right? Maybe I'm really interested in transparency or clarity, the ability to see into an audio image. Or maybe what I really want is this kind of warmth, rich, emotional, organic kind of connection to the sound. Is one of these wrong? I don't know that that's even makes sense to say, right? Uh, it just is. We are organic animals, and we do what we do. We don't necessarily do it the same, and this is the problem you have with speaker designers. These speaker designers are just like everybody else, and maybe somewhere back in their formative experience, they glommed onto this sound signature that they just loved. It was the thing that kind of made them happy, made them want to be loudspeaker designers. Them chasing that sound, the pinnacle of that particular pursuit, may take them up to a place that's different from a different loudspeaker designer. And that maybe explains why cost no object speakers don't sound alike. Anyway, so when I pull that into the conversation about the absolute sound, I run very quickly into the kind of cult of personality, this narcissistic kind of buildup of what I, as a reviewer, think it must be the thing that's real or true or right. And that's baloney. It's just not the case, right? In wine, Robert Parker basically invented modern wine reviewing. And as a result, wine manufacturers started creating wines that would specifically appeal to his taste. And I think that maybe not happens in high-end audio as much, but maybe it did. The point being that there are an enormous number of audio writers out there, and they have their own take. I think what our job as a reader is to read this stuff and try to get a sense of whether or not this writer is our Robert Parker or not our Robert Parker. That is this person's tastes my tastes? And if they are, awesome. And if they're not, okay, no worries, we'll go find somebody else. The chances are there's somebody out there that's into that. This does not help, though, right? In the sense of the absolute sound is a singular type target, and personal taste is as varied as there are personal tasters. Yeah, it's a problem. So that's why I believe that measurements are not necessarily useless. They tend to point you in the right direction, but they don't answer the fundamental question, right? Am I going to like this thing? Is it going to be something that grabs me? Measurements may tell me is whether or not this component will work with this component. That's awesome, but it may not necessarily tell me that this piece of music is going to sound in a way that's maybe better or more pleasing to me than the one that it's replacing. This is hard stuff, right? This is why lit crit or other kind of criticism is problematic. It tends to get this sense of it's more than it really is. Essentially, what we're doing in high-end audio writing is sharing our experiences and rendering a judgment that you may or may not agree with. And that's totally okay if you don't. That's just being human. I want to make sure that when I write something, I'm not necessarily looking for, how do I say this, right? Not necessarily looking for things that will be unique to me, right? I'm not really going to be reaching for pieces of music that you can't find. I'm not really interested in stuff that you can't hear or buy or whatever. I want to make it as useful as possible, knowing that it is going to be an aesthetic kind of discussion, and whether you agree with me or not is going to be a matter of whether or not our tastes line up, whether or not our experiences line up. And maybe that's a result of our physiology or our psychology or our history. Maybe. I don't know. I will tell you, though, that what happens after you do an enormous number of speaker designs, or in the case of a writer, maybe writing about a bunch of speaker designs, is you get a sense of where things lay out on the topology of possibility, as it were. And I think that's what a good writer can bring you, right, is a sense of the topology, so that you can maybe navigate yourself to a place where an audition of this or that makes sense, or maybe doesn't make sense. Um, and that's, I think that's the reality of it, right? That not an absolute sound, but a good sound, a sound that may be quantitatively or just qualitatively better than what I had. That's the aim. I think that's the appropriate aim. It's this self-knowledge, right? Who am I? What do I like? And what can I do to create an experience that provides me with joy, with pleasure, with happiness? And what doesn't? What keeps me from that? What keeps me from getting to my happy place? That's, I think, a better guide than pointing at a platonic ideal, because that crap doesn't exist. All right, so that's some thoughts about the absolute sound, and tell me what you think.